Hi there, I'm Gwen Raimundi. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist associate here in the state of Washington. I have been doing this work for about 4 years now, a little over 4 years. I working mostly with women in connecting to yourself, becoming embodied, working through trauma, understanding how culture and our own personal history impacts who we are today. I am creating this short little video series on consent as an introduction to the 6-month circle that I am co-facilitating with Isabel Abbott. And I'll have information about that down at the bottom there for you to check that out if you like. There'll be 3 videos, I think 3, maybe 4, but definitely 3 videos. Today I'm going to talk about consent, just consent. In the next video I will be talking about boundaries, and then in the 3rd video I'll be talking about trauma and how consent and boundaries and trauma and embodiment all come into play. So today I'm talking about consent. And consent is both a very straightforward thing and very complicated and very complex. Often we think of consent in the terms of no means no, right? We think of consent as a very dual thing, very yes or no, very black and white, there's no questioning. And in many cases, that is true. In many cases, when we are being violated physically, either sexually or physically abused or assaulted in some way, those are very clear violations of our consent, right? And there's other forms of consent that may become complex. For example, often we have surgeries. I had a surgery a few years ago and for endometriosis, and I very much consented in my head. It was very much something I wanted to do. It was very important for my health. It was it was very important for my family. It was a yes. I was not coerced into it in any way. This was very much something I wanted to do. And yet, after the surgery, I started all my PTSD symptoms elevated. They went through the roof. What I came to realize slowly was that while my mind consented absolutely to that surgery, my body did not. My body didn't know what was happening to it. What my body knew was that it was frozen because I was under general anesthesia. It was being cut open, right? And implements were going into my body and searching around and lasering parts of me out, right? And lasering out the endometrial tissue. And then these instruments were pulled out and I was sewed up, right? I was actually taped together. Anyways, my body didn't consent to any of that. It didn't understand what was happening. It only knew it was being harmed and being violated. And so I had a very physical response afterwards of my body saying, something bad happened, something really bad happened, even though I had logically consented to it. And so I needed to do some trauma work to kind of let my body know, hey, we're okay, we're safe. That surgery was okay. It's okay. We're good. We're okay, right? Consent can get complicated. So that's like one example of where a part of us says yes and a part of us says no, like very, very separate parts of us. Consent also can be complicated because we can say yes to something and then change our minds. We don't want to do it anymore. Whatever it is, that can be a sexual union. That can be something as simple as going out to dinner with friends. Like one day, we plan it, we're excited for it, and then the day comes and we're like, yeah, I don't wanna, right? I just don't wanna. And then maybe we cancel and we say, yeah, we're not doing it. And then like 20 minutes later, we've been able to rest or, whatever. And we're like, hey, I really want to go back out again, right? So consent can be complicated in that way. And it doesn't necessarily mean yes or no, right? It doesn't mean that all parts of us are in agreement with that yes or that no, right? Because while my body was saying no to surgery, my body actually needed that surgery so that I could become physically healthier, so that I could not be in pain, right? Um, and so it gets complex. It gets more complex when we are then interacting with another human being, right? When we are in that space of yes, no, right? We're not really sure. We say yes, and then we have a no coming in for whatever reasons. And then we may change our mind again, and then we may not, right? And there's another person on the other side of this, right? Our girlfriend who we're going to meet for dinner. And she's like, dude, make up your freaking mind, right? Because she may feel like I don't have the energy for your yes, no, maybe. Like I need to make plans for my night, right? And so it starts to move into boundaries, consent, both our own boundaries and the boundaries of another person. And like I said, I'll talk about boundaries in the next video. But it is something to remember. This doesn't mean that we don't have the right to change our mind on anything. Because our decision one way or another, or changing our mind on our decision, may impact another person, that doesn't affect our right to change our mind. And it is something that we need to remember. Being able to say yes, no, maybe, and change our mind back and forth a million times is absolutely our right. And we can't expect the world to like wait around for us on the yes, no, maybe, right? So, and I'm speaking about that in innocuous sorts of events, like going out to dinner with a girlfriend. When we're talking about instances of sexual interaction, intimacy, there is it becomes even more complex, right? Because there may be a very strong yes within us that we want to do this thing with this person, right? But our body is somehow triggered into a trauma experience, into a trauma event. And so then everything's all over the place again, right? It's like the surgery where, yes, my mind says yes, and my body is saying, fuck no, right? The same thing can come up in the bedroom, so to speak, or whatever rooms we are sexual in. And it can also happen in the reverse, right? Where we are very, very clear in our mind that no, we do not want this, this sexual type of encounter. We are very clearly saying no in whatever ways. Our body may even be clearly saying no in the ways that it tells us no. And then at some point, our bodies, quote, betray us, right? Our bodies say yes. There's been, I don't know how many rape cases where the defense says, well, she was aroused, so it couldn't have been rape, right? Except that our body physically becoming aroused has nothing to do with how we are feeling violated, how our consent is being trampled, how we aren't being heard. So there's all these sides and there's all this complexity. And on top of all of this, on top of all of this that is like whirling around within us, on a good day when we are emotionally developed and aware and good, right? And okay. On a good day, it's complicated, right? Then we have a culture that tells us, particularly as women, cis women, transgender women, assigned female at birth, non-binary women, all women, right? That we don't have a right to our bodies, that we don't have a right to say no, that when we say no, we don't really mean it, right? That by wearing certain clothes, we're asking for it. By being in certain places, we're asking for it. You know, that whole being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's bullshit, right? Um, the reality that we don't feel safe walking down the street at night, or oftentimes even feel safe walking down the street during the day. This is all by design by our culture, right? To keep us obedient, to keep us compliant, to keep us confused, to keep us subservient. And our culture does a really good job of instilling fear in us. And we are rightfully afraid, right? That it's not, we aren't making it up. It's very dangerous to be female, to be cisgendered, transgendered, assigned female at birth, non-binary. It's not safe. And yet our culture tells us that we're making it all up, right? Of course we're making it all up. So then our consent even gets more confused because we're told that what we think or what we sense in our bodies, and I'll talk about that in when I talk about boundaries, particularly what we sense in our bodies and what we know when we say yes, no, maybe, or change our minds or whatever, isn't really real. Isn't real, really real. We're making it up. When we feel afraid walking down the street, well, why would you feel afraid? There's no reason to feel afraid, right? Oh, that guy that's been following you for the past 6 blocks, he's just going in the same direction you are. There's nothing nefarious there, right? Except that more than likely there is. Right? We know this. We know this from our own lived experiences. We know this from our mothers. We know this from our grandmothers. We know this from the statistics on rape and sexual assault and um, and molestation and all of these things. We know these things, right? We know we're not making it up, and yet we question ourselves. And so consent is complicated and it is complex. And our culture telling us that we're wrong, right? We're wrong in sensing that there's something wrong. We're wrong in saying no. We're wrong in existing, right? Adds to that. It adds to our inability to even be able to say no, to be able to declare that no, I have a right to wear whatever fucking clothes I want to wear, right? I have a right to go to a party and expect to not be drugged and raped, right? I have a right to walk down the street and actually be safe, right? And so, so there's a lot of work to do in unraveling what is consent for me. What does it look like? What does it feel like to say no and feel that no, like believe that no, and believe that no is acceptable? What does it feel like to say yes and believe that yes and know that that yes is acceptable? What does it feel like to be present in my body, in the moment, in the discomfort of the complication of it all, right? And still be able to hold my ground and my truth. What is that like? It's amazing, and it's uncomfortable, and it's messy, and I wouldn't want to be any other way, right? I wouldn't want to live any other way. Having lived outside my body for a very long period of time, and having come in my body in the last, I don't know, within the last 10 years, slowly, right? I wouldn't not be in my body again. And it's not always comfortable, and it's not always fun, and it's complex, right? Like being human is complex, like consent is complex. And while it can be very straightforward, oftentimes it's not. And what one part of us may say yes or no to, another part may say the opposite. And trying to find the meeting point of that, right? The meeting point of when your mind says, yes, I need this surgery, and your body is like, who the fuck is cutting me open? This isn't okay, right? The meeting point of you're very clear that you do not want to have sexual contact of any kind with this person, and yet your body reacts, has a sexual response, right? How do we, how do we, how do we come to terms with that within ourselves? It's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work. And this is some of what we're going to be exploring in this 6-month circle. And we, of course, would be thrilled to have you join us. I will have another video coming out in a few days, and like I said, it will be about boundaries and tying in more of the embodiment piece of consent and what that is, what that may look like for some people, what that may not look like for some people, and then in another video I'll talk about trauma, which is also greatly related to boundaries and consent, and also how living in a world that quite frankly re-traumatizes us daily, right? Because we aren't safe, we aren't physically safe, and how do we function in that world? How do we stay within our bodies and stay present and still function and be in the world, right? So all of this is to come, and if you are interested in joining the circle, like I said, the link is there at the bottom, and if it's on YouTube, it's there in the little description. If you're on my blog, then it's right underneath this video, embedded video. So we'd love to have you join us, of course. Mwah. Hope you have a wonderful next few days, and we'll connect again soon.